Life in the 1950s in a small Midwestern town was great. Alice and Bobby had all the advantages of the middle class and a booming economy. While Bobby fished and played baseball, Alice spent much of her time playing with her dolls and riding her bike. They lived just 2 houses down the street from each other and were often seen together. Just down the street was an old bent-over tree where Bobby and his friends used to hang out for hours. It was rough on the skin and quite ordinary, but the tree was there and easy to climb, and they would spend hours there. As Alice and Bobby grew up, they found themselves at that tree together more and more. Even during the winter they would stay on her, huddled together, sometimes just to keep warm. As they grew up and became teenagers, they knew that they had fallen in love. "We will be," Bobby even put a heart on the tree with their initials, saying proudly, "One day we will be married, I promise you." All through high school they dated. They went to the junior prom and the senior prom and were the king and queen of the senior prom too. Everyone assumed that they would get married, but after graduation they separated. Alice had won a scholarship to attend a college in the Middle East and Bobby went to work at a local factory. They continued writing each other nearly every day, but then one day Bobby got his draft notice. You see, it was now the Vietnam War time and any man that was healthy over 18 and not a student could be drafted, and he received his notice. It was a shock to find out that Bobby was going off to war, and as time went on the two inseparables people started to separate. Alice met a new man and got married. It broke Bobby's heart, but he too moved on. He married, and both Bobby and Alice spent the next 40 years never hearing or seeing each other. But it was now time for their 40th class reunion, and both saw that the other was going to be attending. Bobby had lost his wife 2 years ago from cancer and had kept himself busy with his new grandson and work. He was a plumber in a town not more than 20 miles from where he had grown up. Alice had stayed in the East where she had met her husband. They had been married for 30 years when her husband had been killed in an automobile accident. She had 3 girls, who were now all grown, and 7 grandchildren. As she looked at the invitation to the class reunion, she saw Bobby's name. She wondered how he had been, and with the encouragement of her daughter Jen made plans to attend. As Alice pulled into the small town that had once been her home, she looked around. Things were so different. Her parents had moved just 5 years after she had graduated to Florida, and she had never made it back. The street where she and Bobby had lived looked the same, and she just thought for a moment that she would stop and see if the same old tree was there. Bobby had kept in touch with many of his friends from town and had been helping prepare for the class reunion. He saw his old street once more and decided on a whim to drive up it. His parents had moved to Florida just 10 years ago, and as he went by his old house he reminisced about his childhood. Then he thought of the tree that he had spent so many good years on. He thought he would stop there once more. As he pulled up, he saw a woman standing in front of it. He looked, he couldn't believe it. The woman was Alice. He smiled and walked up to her to give her a hug. It was as though the years just melted away. They held each other for a long moment and laughed as they talked about the old tree. Yes, and there were their initials that they had carved so many years ago. At the reunion they danced and talked. They were in love once again. Just 3 months later, wedding bells rang out and Bobby and Alice were married right under that old tree. It was so fitting.